It's Rami Zurayk, and I'm a professor at the Faculty of Agriculture and Food Sciences at the American University in Beirut, and I currently chair the Department of Landscape Design and Ecosystem Management. I also serve as the acting director of the Interfaculty Graduate Environmental Sciences Program, which is a graduate program dealing with various aspects of environmental sciences. This is my job at AUB. I am also in a couple of other positions that are outside AUB. I am a member of the steering committee of the high-level panel of experts, HLPE, of the Committee on Food Security, CFS, which is, we can talk about that later, but essentially sits in Rome and is constituted within the FAO, but brings together various key players and stakeholders in food security and nutrition. And I'm also a commissioner on the Lancet Commission for sustainable diets from sustainable food systems, which also brings together a large number of international stakeholders around issues that are directly related to food security and nutrition. Sure, that's of course my background is in agriculture. I mean, I came to soil science from agriculture, and for a very long time, agriculture was considered to be the main sector involved in food security. That, of course, is not the case. We do not believe that anymore. We know that that food security and nutrition encompasses way more than just agriculture, but for a very long time this is essentially what we thought, and therefore it was a very natural move from being someone who's involved in the production of food with a lot of interest in the geographies of food, which brings within these interests a large social science dimension, to become interested in the different aspects of food security. I have to add quickly that the whole conception of food security and the relationship was strengthened by two very important and pivotal moments in my academic and professional career. One of them is the fact that I have worked in rural development for a very long time, in various places, starting with Yemen and ending with the dry mountainous lands of Lebanon, specifically the region of Hersel, but also all over the country where I have implemented rural development projects. And this, of course, elicited in me an interest in the community dimension of food production and food systems and the food value chain. And of course, on the second issue was the practically concomitant Israeli war in Lebanon in 2006, which destroyed a huge part of the rural area of Lebanon, which is the south of the country. And at the same time, the food crisis of 2007, 2008, which also brought forth a lot of interest we had in food production, but also in food distribution and access to food and other dimensions related to that. So all of this, there's this interest in food, in conflict, in food systems, etc., was key in making me interested in food security and nutrition. Okay, that's of course very broad question, and I'm going to try to bring this into my own vision, my own optic. I'm very interested essentially in issues that have to do with the food security and nutrition of vulnerable communities. I know that this is not the only a global problem of food security and nutrition. But that is my essential interest. And that comes from a long history of political activism and involvement and core beliefs that make me the person I am. And specifically, I am extremely concerned with the dimensions of food security under food security in conflict, and with the use of food as a political control tool, and as a tool of siege and a tool of war. And not only food, but all aspects of the food system, starting with agriculture and ending up with the quality and the type of food that is available to classes that do not have the privilege to be in the high income groups. Sure. First, let me just say that the panel, the HLPE, is a part of the Committee on Food Security, and that is it's a multi-stakeholder platform, that is inclusive, and that's the CFS, the Committee on Food Security, and meaning that. Not only are the three Rome-based agencies, FAO, IFAD, and WFP, involved in it, but also governments, states and governments, private sector, and very importantly, civil society, because the CSM, the civil society mechanism, is an inherent and very important part of the CFS, and in fact, I am in the high-level panel through close collaboration, close cooperation with the CSM, and this is a cooperation that's been historical, because I was and still am one of the founding members of the Arab network, Arab Food Sovereignty Network, and that is a network that involve farmers' organizations, and the organization is involved in food and food issues and food sovereignty, and of course food security and nutrition, from Mauritania all the way to Yemen. There are over 50 civil society groups, unions of farmers involved in the food sovereignty, in the Arab Food Sovereignty Network. Now, the CFS coordinates and promotes policy convergence and gives advice and support to countries whenever the countries need it, promotes monitoring and accountability, and also provides a global strategic vision for countries, of the world and international organizations. The high-level panel is the science policy interface of the CFS essentially for evidence-based analysis and advice to the CFS. And I think these are important because I'm an academic, not only an activist, and therefore I'm part of the science-based community and of the evidence-based, the believers in the need for evidence-based policy formulations and policy making. And so the panel does a lot of things as well. We assess and analyze current state of food security and provide up-to-date scientific knowledge to the CFS members, but also to the community at large. And we do that through a number of means. Most importantly, the reports are produced by the high-level panel. We recently launched a Sustainable Forestry for Food Security and Nutrition report that's available on the website, and we're launching the nutrition report very soon, and the multi-stakeholder partnership report also very soon. So these are reports that one would want to look forward to. I think they're very important because they bring together the state of the art science and policy, and from various and involving, essentially involving all the stakeholders. I mean, science is of course made in academic institutions, but also good science is made at the users level and at the popular level in collaboration. And we are tending increasingly to use indigenous science as part of our input, although this will need to also be vetted through the eyes of true scientific and evidence. So various sources, but essentially all of these will need to be treated exactly as we treat academic science. My role is, I'm one of the experts in there. I am particularly interested in a couple of issues because of the fact that I'm within the broad geographies of food, the landscape dimensions. I'm interested in the spatial issues that are related to the evolution of farming systems, but also very interested in the dimensions of conflicts and crises, which impinge strongly on food security and nutrition of vulnerable groups. So I interact with everybody in there, but I bring forth with me these two aspects of my expertise. I would say I'd give you a resounding yes. I think this is a region that has its specificity. I don't want to make comments that are banal, and that's a region that goes through, that's very turbulent, goes through wars, etc. But that's something that needs to be noted. But very more directly, this is the fastest urbanizing region in the world, and that's to me. It is imperative to be able to frame this in any analysis of the Arab world, of Middle East and North Africa, whichever way you want to call it, is today. Because this urbanization has got different facets to it. We need to look at it from the fact that there is a big move from people who are essentially, in principle, from food-producing regions, leaving towards becoming net consumers of food. That's, of course, the theory of why we're interested. The other issues, in fact, is that the rural regions are although in the number of people in rural regions in the Middle East and North Africa is still increasing, while the percentage is, in fact, decreasing. And that the vast majority of the people living in food-producing regions, i.e. the food producers, are net food buyers. They're not net food producers, which also, envelops all of this with a vision that needs to be developed for a very, very specific case. Why is it like that? It's because, first of all, diets are changing, and the Arab world is still going through its nutritional transition, reaching towards the end of it, but very much there, adopting a Western-style diet based on a lot of animal proteins, a lot of fats, a lot of sugars, and this has got some implications. It increases the calorific intake, but these are calories that do not contribute to a healthy nutrition. So there is a lack of food security, not in terms only of the access to calories, but also in the type and the quantity of food that we consume. So that's one, and this is something that's happening in rural areas as well as in urban areas. So that's one. Two, the issue is important because of the meager resource endowment of the Arab world. Resources that are, in principle, should be used for the production of food. It is ironic, of course, that the region in which I am today present, the Levant, was known as the Fertile Crescent region, and that is the center of origins of grain, legumes, and of wheat. And that today this region is the biggest importer of wheat in the world. I do not need to say more. I think this small example indicates very clearly the depth of the problem in which we are. Yes, we were a breadbasket, and yes, this breadbasket appears to be empty today, or emptying very rapidly. And of course, because it is a region of conflicts brought upon it, conflict created from within it, both together, the synergy of geopolitics and of internal reasons that have their historical roots. The end result is that this has also implications on food security and nutrition. It has implication on groups such as, for example, refugees, and I do not need to say more about that. I think this is an issue that is all over the press. And it has also implications on the access to technology, and that has also implication on the distribution network of food, as if we're thinking that food is, a lot of the food is imported in this region. And it has also implications on the areas that can be used for agriculture. Areas of conflict are areas that are outside production. So the different dimensions of food security are affected by conflicts. And I think this is something that because it is so specific to our region, we need to make the effort to study it more, to understand it more, to mitigate it more in order to create resilience in all communities, but especially in the vulnerable communities. I don't think we can talk about the MENA in isolation from the rest of the world. Although MENA has its own sets of problems, but it also has all the sets of problems of all the other countries in the world. It has specific problems, as happens everywhere. Still, the core, the basic issue is a humanities issue. It's an issue in which our food system is contributing to pushing the boundaries, of the planetary boundaries to their very limit. For example, our food system is responsible for a very large, a very significant part of the carbon dioxide emission, the greenhouse gas emission, and therefore is linked to climate change and all the impacts that it has to have. We have the biodiversity becomes a huge issue if you look at the expansion or the thinking about expanding arable lands in order to feed an increasing population, of the whole neo-Malthusian approach. And I don't think these are issues that needs to be addressed in this way. I think we need to make sure that we understand very, very clearly that we cannot go ahead, we cannot have a planet that is healthy with the people that is healthy and societies that are healthy, and that take health here, of course, in its broad meaning, without ourselves making, across the planet, making serious changes in the way we consume food. But the way we consume food, incidentally, is also the way food is marketed. Who produces the food? Why is it produced in this way? What are the corporate agents in charge of marketing the food, of pushing it into populations, and of spreading ideas and images associated with the consumptions of food that we know are harmful for humans and we know are harmful at planetary scale. I think this is my first policy approach that I would put. I think we have to have a serious reconsideration of our diets. This is going to be very important, because this is going to change fully and completely the way we look at access, and at utilization, and at the stability of food. In terms of policy, I think we need to also, and this goes of course with it, we need to enforce the concept that food is a human right. The right to food approach is absolutely essential. Food is not something you choose to have or not to have. Food is something that you need to have. Healthy, nutritious food is something you absolutely require to have. It is a basic human right. It is a right that without which you cannot exert any of your other rights. The right to education, the right to work, none of these you can actually do. The right to health, none of these you can exert without having the right to food. And the right to food is not just the right to empty calories. It is the right to healthy and nutritious food that allows everybody across the planet to fulfill their human potential. I would say before going into more, technologies and others, I say let's focus on these and make serious and extremely important, foray into these issues. And then from there on, I think human ingenuity and technologies will provide us, if it decides to work in that direction, with solutions that can make this planet and this world and this society a much better place to be. Okay, we ask questions when whatever we answer can make a difference. And in that particular case, it doesn't really make, and whatever I say to you, it doesn't make any difference. The whole idea of self-sufficiency for the MENA region does not have ecological basis. It's not anymore, if it has ever been, but it's not a political issue. It is just that, there is a need, there is a demand, there are resources. This region has got a number of people in it, and it will need to import part of the food that it consumes. And that is not because the MENA region did anything wrong, or it's just the way things are. It's like countries do not have oil and they need to import oil. We can't tell them, bury your detritus and wait for a few million years until it turns into oil, and then things will work out. It doesn't work this way. This is an open world, and this, there is no going back on economic globalization, on trade. But trade needs to be fair, and trade needs to be bidirectional, and trades need not to be used as a way to dominate people and to extract political commitments from them that they would not have made at other times. This is what is important. It's not trade per se. It is trade that is used in order to scare people and in order to make them abide by a greater imperial will, for example. So that is very important. But now, however, my personal belief is that we should continue, agriculture should proceed in this part of the world. There are many reasons for that, many reasons. One of them has to do with the fact that we still have a big agrarian community. And until somebody comes and tells me what they want to do with 100 million Arab farmers who cannot be absorbed in any factory or employment, when at the time where the migratory routes are all closing down, I'm going to still say, well, agriculture, even if it becomes subsidized, is going to be extremely important if for economic reasons, but even for just social reasons. For the presence of people in places, for the fact that you cannot just create an army of laborless individuals, because armies of laborless individuals will do what armies do, and armies fight. And that is something that we have plenty of in this region, and we cannot work to have more of it. And the cost of farming in our regions is maybe higher than outside, but it will never be as high as the cost of any war. There's been a brouhaha around rural livelihoods. I mean, The World Bank has, of course, published a significant report, a significant departure from what the big agencies used to think, that agriculture needs to be made by kind of factory farms and by big industrial groups, and I think that was pivotal, because precisely it was the World Bank, because that was not expected from the World Bank. I think it was called Agriculture for Rural Development or something of the sort. And I thought it was good. Of course, it was essentially based on getting farmers to join the market in the kind of the market will save you approach. But the general context in which it came was a good context. And I personally have used it and continue to do so. But after that, and I don't believe that rural livelihoods have been adequately addressed. Why? Because how do you address them? So the big problem is, we don't really know what to do with this. And of course, rural livelihoods in the Swiss Alps is very different from rural livelihoods in the Yemeni highlands. So also the idea of rural livelihood needs to be taken with its regional dimension. I am more interested in rural livelihoods in the Yemeni highlands than in the Swiss Alps, although I actually appreciate the Swiss Alps and the people who live in the rural areas there. However, we have historically the livelihoods of the people living in rural areas in parts of our world were built on farming. As I was saying a minute ago, that has declined because of a plethora of reasons, but one of them is that the prices of food are way too low. And while this works reasonably well for low-income groups, the answer to it is not to make the price of food low. It's to increase the income of low-income groups so that there is more. But this would, of course, mean a redistribution of the immense amounts of wealth that's being accumulated. And I think this is going to be a tough one, short of a major upheaval in the way or change in the way we see or do things. So therefore, for precisely these reasons, the idea of addressing rural livelihood, we've had way more talk about that than actual action. Countries in our countries, we do not really have a secondary sector, an industrial sector. Also, many reasons for that. Essentially, technology transfer is immensely difficult, it's profoundly political, not able to do that very easily, and factories prefer to take our cheap labor than actually provide us with sufficient information to be able to create factories in the field. Anybody who's interested in this can read more about Kropotkin and factories in the field, which was addressed, at ideas which are over 100 years old on these issues. But short of this, I don't really see what we can do. We've tried a lot. I've worked for a long time in trying to enhance rural livelihoods, and I don't really see how we're going to be able to do that. Prices of, access to resources is extremely limited by those who actually need to have the resources to produce. And I mean here water and land and capital. And markets are essentially closed or barred, and they're difficult. They're controlled by standards that are very often, impossible to break through. They create, invisible but very tangible walls Now we also have open trade, which means that the markets can be flooded by subsidized goods. That's something that also is reasonably well known and that I will not dwell upon. where does this leave us? Essentially, it leaves us with situations where people are cornered into outlawness, almost, being almost into banditry. And you see that a lot in the Bekaa region of Lebanon. I mean, we make and especially within cannabis, the cannabis production, which is illegal, but hey, legal because nobody does anything to those who are illegal. And my vision on this is that as long as there is no state that can offer any on the one hand control, on the other hand alternative, I would say that the state is turning a blind eye to this production because it really does not have any alternative to give. Still, that is illegal, and doing that creates an atmosphere and the whole society where people do not like living. Nobody likes to live with banditry all around them and completely outside the law. That is not true. This is not something that people actually like because they're from that area or from that other area. But what else do people have? Zero. So this is where we're going. So this whole idea of rural development, at the risk of doing a bad pun, has been farmed out to thugs and leaders of armed groups who have no interest except to exploit others and accumulate themselves illegally acquired wealth. Of course, the linkages are, I mean, I would consider those linkages to be very clear. Whenever you have a conflict, I mean, at the very simple level, whenever you have a conflict, you don't have access to food, and that is going to create distress. And sometimes this access is purely physical, just the fact that food is not there. Some people do not have also economic access to food in situations of conflict, but that's the initial response. I think there is a profound dialectic that operates in here, because also situations of the lack of food, the increase in prices, for example, absence of food, absence of the ability to produce or to acquire, will also create situations that are conducive to conflict. So they feed into each other's, and we are at risk of creating here situations that can only end up with the damage and destructions of social systems in rural but also in urban areas, because urban areas are the first to suffer. I mean, the first. They also suffer from from conflict in terms of access to food, and food is very often used as a tool of war. Like an example for I have a book with Anne Goff about that, but how Israel has used the food security of the people of Gaza in order to control and impose itself by force. What is less known, of course, is how food production or agriculture has also been used historically in Palestine through settlements in order to control resources and therefore also exploit people and land. And there's a good thesis by Will Thompson on these issues. So these linkages are clear to us. They don't need much. The more interesting question is, what can we do about it? Our response has been historically, the moment we hear of a conflict, we say, okay, let's send relief. It's all like, let's parachute some rice, oil, wheat, grain, etc., which is, excellent. I mean, thank you very much for everybody who sends and contributes. That's an excellent thing. It solves problems that are immediate. But in cases of protracted crisis, this just can't. It just can't go on like that. And you're always going to miss people who are too remote to be able. I think that, and this may sound a bit extreme, but that I think that in countries that live in the middle of protracted turmoil, I think we need to understand we need to study what's going on today and to understand where there has been resilience in the food production system and replicate these local, they're not experiments, local cases, local situations. I know, for example, for a fact from colleagues who've been working in Syria that women's involvement in food production has increased in rural areas, and that a great part of the resilience of certain rural areas has been due to a combination of receiving aid, but also of local production whenever this was possible. And that local production essentially made possible by the involvement of women. And that involvement of women is not new. Women are an important and extremely important, albeit invisible part of the food system everywhere across the globe, in the Middle East, of course, in the Bekaa, in Syria, everywhere. Women do 4 or 5 jobs at the same time, and one of them is to be an important participant. Let's recognize that. Let's create, let's design, let's work in a way in which resilience is built and in which women have far more responsibility, they do have it, but far more empowerment in being able to determine and decide in times of peace. So we prepare for times when there is less peace. Words of wisdom is the following. The topic of food security and food and nutrition security, food security and nutrition is a broad topic that brings everybody in. It's a meta-discipline, and which means that it is a discipline in which anything that you've studied before can be put to excellent use, because it involves it's really across the board. So if you're a lawyer and you're interested in this, remember that you're a lawyer. Don't make that a move or try to build on what you already have in order to further the idea that food security and nutrition is way broader than just agricultural production or dietary needs or others. The issues of rights, for example, is an issue that has to do with lawyers. We have far too few lawyers dealing with matters that have to do with food security and nutrition, and we could use many, many of them. So that field is open to anyone who has a humanitarian, or humanist rather than humanitarian, pardon me, humanist pulsions, a desire to be part of the change of society. And they should come with their existing baggage and adapt it to food security and nutrition.